Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Insider Carpentry. In this video, we're going to take a comprehensive look at jamb switches. First, we're going to start off in the shop. I'm going to show you how to make a jig to really quickly mortise in jamb switches for the electrical box that they require. And then we're going to bounce over to the job site, and I'm going to show you the jig in action and how you can knock out these jamb switch openings in about 3 minutes or so. So enjoy the video, guys. We're going to start off in the shop here. In making this jig for jamb switches, I needed a unique jig that would actually slide over the doorstop because of the style of doors that I use. So I was flying by the seat of my pants a little bit, but it came together well. So first thing I did was just started off with a piece of plywood, the width of it was probably about 6 inches wide or so, and ripped a couple strips down for both sides that would straddle the doorstop, and went about kind of trying to decide how to go about assembling this thing. As you can see, I've got a piece of plywood in the center, and that's imitating my doorstop. I made it plenty wide. It didn't need to be the exact width of the doorstop. I wanted to make sure I had plenty of space in case I ever ran into a wider doorstop, that I wouldn't make the jig obsolete on accident. What I'm doing here is laying out my pieces, and I'm laying out my pieces using a 1/8 inch gauge block and the plate for the switch box, or the jamb switch box. And what that's going to do is allow me to use a bushing on my router. So if I offset an 1/8 inch with this gauge block, that's going to allow me to use a 1/2 inch bit in the router and a 5/8 inch bushing. And the whole cutout size will yield a perfect fit for my electrical box plate. If that doesn't make sense, just keep watching. It'll make sense in a little bit as it comes together. Now that I have my pieces laid out, it's time to start putting the thing together. So I'm just using glue and some crown staples on the continuous side of the doorstop. The other side is where the cutout for the box will be. Now again, for the box side of the jig, I'm going to start with the lower piece of the split side, glue it well, and then some crown staples also. This part of the process is where my 1/8 inch gauge block is going to come in super handy. As you can see, I've got the plate for my box laying in there, and then I'm going to put that gauge block, that 1/8 inch gauge block, right up tight against it, and then I'm going to smash everything together as I assemble this. That's going to give me my 1/8 inch offset to use with my router bushing, and that'll ensure that whenever I'm routing, I end up getting a perfect fit, because it's going to match the offset between the router and the gauge block to the strike plate. And just as a reminder, that center piece in the middle is just in there loosely. It's not nailed or anything. That's just imitating my stop block, and it's just helping keep everything nice and uniform. To finish off this square cutout, I've got to get a little sliver of plywood in to close off this open side of the box yet. So here I'm just taking a measurement for that, and I'm going to get that cut and installed. Now this is a really important step in this process you don't want to miss. Now that I have the pieces above and below the switch box installed permanently, I actually need to rip 1/32 off of this piece that is imitating my doorstop. That way the opening for the box shifts over as close to the doorstop as possible. I want that to end up 1/32 away from the doorstop, so I had to shave a 32nd off of this piece to make that all work out properly. Again, you'll notice that I've got the strike plate for the box sitting in this opening along with my 1/8 inch gauge block. That's going to give me my proper spacing. Gluing up this piece, I'm going to staple it in there, smash everything together nice and tight, and the next step will be cutting this thing out. Now this part's kind of tricky. I need to use a router to route out this rectangle, but my centerpiece here is loose. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is use some CA glue Just going to dab a couple dots in there, and I'm going to glue this piece on in the middle temporarily with just a couple dots of CA glue. It's going to hold it nice and tight, but I'm going to be able to knock this off easily, and it's not going to damage anything after I'm done routing. Notice how I'm trying to push this piece all the way to one side, and you'll notice that 1/32 of an inch gap in there. That's really key to get this box shifted over so that it's in the proper place, and I'm 1/32 proud of the doorstop. The next order of operations will be to route out this rectangular hole. I'm going to use a flush bit on my router to do this, but first I'm going to get the bulk of the material out. To do that, I'm using a spade bit. I'm going to drill 2 holes, top and bottom, and then connect the dots with my jigsaw to get the bulk of the material out. And here's a close-up of most of the material hogged out with the spade bit and jigsaw right prior to routing. I want to thank you guys for all of you who are buying tools that I use in these videos. In the notes below the videos, those are affiliate links, and that is kind of like a sponsorship for these videos, a way that you can donate to the cause without actually having to pay money and donate to the cause. So that's what keeps the channel alive. Keep buying those tools and clicking those links. It's much appreciated. Last year I did an in-depth video review of these DeWalt compact routers along with some of my favorite router bits. Definitely check out that video back in my archives. I love this router. I'm super happy with it. I think I've got like 5 or 6 of them now. Just can't get enough of them. As you can see, this centerpiece popped right off just according to plan with that CA glue. Worked really well. My thinking is if you're going to spend a substantial amount of time making a jig like this, you might as well do it right and make it look decent and something that you're going to be proud of. So here I'm just trimming off the ends, and I'm going to run both sides of the jig through the table saw just to flush everything up with my 2 thicknesses. That way it's just got a really nice seamless feel to it. Getting everything nicely sanded here. I'm going to put a couple coats of lacquer on this just so it's nice and smooth. So sanding everything over is going to make it, just give it that nice extra touch. Then I'm also going to hit all the edges that I can with a 1/16 inch radius bit. It's just going to ease the edges. It's going to keep things from splintering, make it more durable, and just give it the whole thing a better feel. It's coming together really nicely, but we are not done yet. Still a few tricky details that need to be worked out to make this thing as functional as what I'd like it to be. Now ignore this mortise right here. This was a previous trial. But this, let's simulate this as the doorstop. It worked out really well. What I was going to do is to be able to bump the inside of my channel up against the doorstop. And then I will be able to clamp it down. But notice right here, this inside edge is actually, I have it set so that whenever I'm mortising, my mortise will be 1/32 proud of the doorstop. Now the actual box is 1.25 inches wide, and a door is 1 3/8 inches, so there's not much space here. So I wanted to leave as much meat along here as possible, but I don't want my router cutting into this doorstop. So I've got it set at 1/32 proud, which is perfect. And then you'll notice here, because my because I've got a 5/8 collar and a 1/2 inch bit, that means my actual cavity here needs to be 1/16 bigger. So this is set so it's 1/32 that way of the doorstop. So then whenever my collar rides around the inside of this top piece of 3/4 inch ply, it'll still miss the doorstop and the bit will be 1/32 proud of the doorstop in here. What I'm doing here right now is preparing to make some dados. I have the main body sizing of this mortise taken care of now, but I still need to make a secondary mortise which will allow the box to go all the way through. So I'm marking lines for a dado. This dado is going to house some pieces of plexiglass that I can put in and out. It'll allow me to actually have an offset to make a smaller mortise. It'll all make sense in a little bit if you just keep watching, but that's what I'm doing here right now. To get the dado in here for my plexiglass strips, all I'm doing is clamping a piece of plywood and using my pencil lines as a reference, and just grabbed the router that I had with a 1/2 inch bit chucked in it with a 5/8 bushing. Just really handy to grab and go, using the plywood as a straight edge and routing that groove. So here you see my piece of plexiglass. I've still got to rip that into strips, but that's what's going on right now. Double checking it with the box, make sure my sizing looks good. It does, thankfully. So now it's time to do a little light sanding on these dados, cut my plexiglass strips, and away we go. There's a good chance the safety police would not have approved of my methods of cutting these strips on the table saw and miter saw, so I'll spare you that video footage. But as you can see, they turned out pretty good, fitting pretty nice. So happy with how this turned out. These plexiglass pieces will be attached with a couple of small wood screws. So what I'm doing now is just measuring and marking the holes for those screws with a permanent marker, being very careful to get the hole marking spot in the exact same place on both pieces. That way the pieces will be interchangeable, and if I get them switched around, it doesn't matter. Using a standard drill bit for my pilot hole through both the plexiglass and the wood, and then a countersink bit to ensure that the screw head on the wood screw sits below the surface of the plexiglass. Now here, if you use a regular drill bit or a regular drill, or heaven forbid an impact, you're really asking for trouble trying to put these screws in, because if you over torque them at all, it's going to, one, either break the plexiglass. This is actually Lexan, I think. But anyways, either case, you might break the plastic, or over torquing them will just strip out the hole. And if that happens, it's not the end of the world. It could be plugged with a dowel and then re-drilled, but definitely don't want to do that. So here I'm using a screwdriver, but you can use a drill. You just have to be really careful. So a couple notes. So again, this is my door mock-up. This is 1 3/8. This represents a doorstop, even though it's thicker. The doorstop is nailed on 1 3/8 back. So with this jig, I can slide the jig over the doorstop, and I can still route with the doorstop attached. I need that for split jam doors. Now, I bought this from Templico, and it unfortunately is designed to be used on a jam without the doorstop installed. So this will not work with a split jamb door or a door with the doorstop nailed on if you don't want to remove it. In order for this to work, I would have to cut this off, and then I would have nowhere for my bearing to go. So that's why I made 2 layers, 1/2 inch and 3/4, and then I can go right over the top of the doorstop, as you can see. So this is going to work pretty good for me, I think. In hindsight, maybe I could have used 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch. Probably would have reduced the thickness a little bit, but it is what it is. I added some screws here. These are just extras so that in case I lose these guys, the screws from these strips, whenever I take it out, I've got extra screws there. These holes are just holes so that I can screw the jig to the door jamb. I gave myself lots of them. Anyway, plenty of use. And I've also mortised a slot on the back side here for these plastic pieces to stow away, so that if I don't want to use these, I just want to mortise for my plate, I don't have to worry about losing these pieces. I can just screw them back in here and it won't affect anything. I got lines here. This represents the fatter part of my box, and then one line in the center all the way around represents the center point. Now I did put a couple coats of lacquer on this. I need a couple more probably, but this is pretty much done now and ready for work. So back to the job site. In practicality, this jig was everything that I hoped it would be. It worked perfectly. It slides right over the doorstop, no issues. You can just tack it on with a couple screws and go to town. Time-wise, the jig takes about 3 to 4 minutes per door, so you can't beat that. If you've got your routers chucked up with a 1/2 inch bit and 5/8 bushing, it's no big deal at all. So this jig was a good investment of time that will definitely get good use in the future. That being said, now that I've made this jig, I will almost certainly never install another jamb switch in my life again. That's kind of how it goes. These motion lights are coming into style more, so maybe they take the place of jamb switches. I'm not sure, but hopefully we get some jobs where I can actually use this and make a little bit of money off of it, but we'll see. Alright guys, so just routed one of these, and I looked at the time whenever I hit the record button, and the total elapsed time from start to finish on routing one of these was just a hair under 4 minutes, 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So kind of show you what I got going on here. That is the hole after it's all done. Now I forgot my corner chisel. I've got a handy little corner chisel that will remove everything in the corner. I don't have that with me, so I'm not going to mess with that right now, but otherwise that's completely done. And got another one over here you can see that I just did, but on this house, every closet they want a jamb switch, so getting a production method for this is really important. Also a really high quality method that's going to yield a really nice mortise. There are a number of tools I am using for this. I'm using 2 routers. This is for the plate, and then this larger router with a large spiral bit is for cutting out the actual hole all the way through the jamb. Also, I'm using a spade bit to get this started. That way I'm not trying to plunge this giant thing. That would not be fun. And I'm needing a Phillips bit, and then also using a Torx bit for these screws, which I attach to the door with this thing. As always guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully this video is useful to somebody out there, and maybe if not, you can at least have learned something about how to make router templates. So as always, give the video a like, give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe, and tool links are in the notes below. It's a great way to support the channel. We'll see you on the next video, and thanks for watching.